Week 1 is officially behind us, and now the real conversations begin. It's time to talk about the harsh reality every NFL roster faces: cut candidates. 5 players on this Broncos team are staring at the possibility of losing their spot, and their performances so far make that reality impossible to ignore. Let's start with one name that stands out: Webb. Simply put, it was a rough showing. Webb looked overwhelmed, struggling to find his footing from the opening snap. His run blocking was shaky, and the numbers backed it up with an abysmal grade in the low 30s. What makes it worse is who he was up against: not starters, not second stringers, but the 49ers' depth players, and even then, Webb couldn't hold his ground. Yes, he looked slightly better in pass protection, but even that came with help. Too often it was his fellow linemen who saved the pocket with chip blocks, keeping Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci from taking unnecessary hits. Without that support, the flaws in Webb's game would have been exposed even more. It's tough to say this because Webb entered camp with excitement as a potential undrafted gem. But right now, he simply doesn't look ready. And with this Broncos offensive line depth chart showing stronger performances from others fighting for the same job, his window to make the roster is closing fast. For Webb, the message is simple: unless he delivers a flawless, dominant performance in the next opportunity, his chances of making the roster are slim. Nothing is set in stone, but right now the tape tells the story: Webb just doesn't look ready for the 53-man roster. My gut says the Broncos move on, unless something changes fast. Now let's turn to another name in danger: Courtney Jackson, wide receiver and special teams contributor. There were flashes, small moments where he showed some effort, but overall, the performance just wasn't strong enough. His grade reflected it, landing in the mid to upper 40s, and that mirrors what the eye test revealed. The bigger issue: he's buried on the depth chart. Marvin Mims, Jaleel McLaughlin, Tyler Beatty, and even Michael Bandy have all taken meaningful reps on special teams ahead of him. And when you add in the crowded wide receiver room, Jackson's odds shrink even further. The truth is, the Broncos have depth and talent already in place at these positions, and Jackson hasn't shown enough to break through. Sometimes it just comes down to numbers, and right now, those numbers aren't working in his favor. Some decisions feel straightforward, and unfortunately, Courtney Jackson falls into that category. It's not personal, it's just the reality of how this roster is shaping up. The competition is fierce, and Jackson hasn't shown enough to stand out. Now let's move to the third name on this list: Prieskorn. Yes, he found the end zone. 1 catch, 7 yards, and a touchdown. It was a nice moment, no doubt. But a single highlight doesn't erase the bigger picture. The Broncos' tight end room is loaded with stronger options: Adam Troutman, Lucas Krull, Nate Adkins, and others who bring more consistency and reliability. Against that level of depth, Prieskorn simply doesn't stack up. On the flip side, there's still one young name worth keeping an eye on: Caleb Lohner. His performance against the 49ers wasn't spectacular, but the raw tools are undeniable. At 6'7" with rare athleticism, he's a project player who might take time to develop, but those physical gifts can't be taught. Football IQ and technique can grow. Height, length, and explosiveness? That's something you either have or you don't, and Lohner has it. Caleb Lohner remains a fascinating case. He didn't make much noise against the 49ers, but his size and athleticism still make him worth holding on to, at least for now. If he fails to show growth through the rest of the preseason, the conversation could shift. But today, if it comes down to him versus Caden Prieskorn, I'm leaning toward keeping Lohner's upside and cutting Prieskorn loose. Now onto another name in danger: Sam Franklin Jr. Franklin, signed earlier this offseason, had a quiet outing against San Francisco. He recorded just a single tackle and otherwise drifted through the game without impact. That's a problem when the Broncos' secondary is this deep. Look at the talent ahead of him. J.L. Skinner continues to flash, P.J. Locke has carved out a steady role, and the starters are already locked in. Even depth players like Devin Key are stacking good reps. With that much competition, Franklin hasn't done enough to stand out. On a defense loaded with young playmakers, he risks becoming the odd man out. The preseason is built for players to seize opportunities and make a name for themselves. Unfortunately, Sam Franklin Jr. hasn't done that. With the depth in Denver's secondary, he's drifting toward the edge of the roster. Unless he delivers something special soon, it's hard to see a path forward for him in orange and blue. And now the final name on this list, Kyrese Rowan. Rowan saw just 7 snaps with 1 target and no receptions. In a wide receiver room as competitive as Denver's, that won't cut it. The top 6 spots feel locked in. Courtland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant, Trent Sherfield, and others are already separating themselves with strong performances. Even players lower on the depth chart have made highlight plays this preseason. That leaves Rowan struggling to climb a steep hill. The bottom tier of receivers isn't just fighting for depth, they're battling against teammates who are actively making plays and proving their value. Right now, Rowan hasn't shown enough to move up that ladder. In a crowded room, that usually means one thing: you're on the outside looking in. And there it is, 5 Broncos players who are standing on shaky ground as roster cuts approach. None of these decisions are easy, but that's the reality of life in the NFL. Training camp and preseason are brutal proving grounds. Some rise to the occasion, others fade away. For these 5 names, the next snaps they take may very well decide their future in Denver. That's what makes this game so intense, so unforgiving, and so compelling. The Broncos are building something real, and only the strongest will survive the cut.